A single number forced some of the biggest car companies in the world to stop and pay attention. Not a new battery. Not a revolutionary electric vehicle. Not some futuristic technology straight out of a science fiction movie. Just a number 8.4, 1% at first glance. It sounds insignificant. Most people would scroll past it without a second thought. But inside engineering departments across the automotive world, that number triggered a very different reaction. Because hidden behind it was a question nobody expected to ask in 2026. What if the future of transportation isn't fully electric after all? For years, the auto industry looked like it was moving in one direction. Tesla was pushing electric vehicles into the mainstream. Governments were announcing plans to phase out gasoline cars. Automakers were spending billions building battery factories and redesigning entire production lines around EVs. The assumption seemed obvious. The internal combustion engine had reached its peak. Whatever improvements remained would be small and incremental. The real breakthroughs would come from batteries, charging networks, and software. Then a Chinese company called Geely released a claim that made many of those assumptions suddenly feel less certain. Its latest hybrid engine achieved a thermal efficiency of 48.41%. To most people, that sentence means almost nothing, but to engineers, it means everything. Because for more than a century, one problem has haunted every gasoline engine ever built. Most of the energy inside the fuel never reaches the wheels. It simply disappears every time fuel burns. Enormous amounts of energy escape as heat. Engines get hot. Exhaust systems get hot. Entire cooling systems exist because so much energy is being wasted. For decades, the world's best engineers chased the same goal. Squeeze a little more. Useful work out of every drop of fuel. The progress was slow, painfully slow. Each tiny improvement required years of research, testing, and refinement. And the closer engineers got to the theoretical limits of combustion, the harder every additional gain became. That's what made announcement impossible to ignore, because this wasn't just another improvement. It appeared to be a jump, large enough to make the industry look twice. And what made the situation even more interesting was something most headlines barely mentioned. The efficiency number wasn't the most important part of the story. The range was. Reports began circulating that hybrid vehicles using similar technology could potentially travel more than 2,000 kilometers before needing to refuel. Think about that for a moment. A driver could leave one city, cross entire regions, continue into another country, and still have fuel left in the tank. Suddenly, a different conversation started emerging. For years, the biggest concern surrounding electric vehicles had been range anxiety. Charging infrastructure continued improving, but many regions still lacked reliable charging networks. Long-distance travel remained a concern for millions of drivers. Now, a different possibility was entering the discussion. What if a vehicle could deliver exceptional efficiency without requiring a charging stop at all? At first, many observers assumed the claim was exaggerated, but the more experts examined the technology behind it, the more attention it received, and this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable for the rest of the industry. Because Geely wasn't relying on a single breakthrough. There was no magic component, no secret fuel, no revolutionary battery hidden beneath the floor. Instead, the company appeared to improve dozens of small things. Simultaneously, higher compression ratios allowed the engine to extract more energy from combustion. Fuel injection systems delivered fuel with extraordinary precision. New combustion chamber designs helped fuel burn more evenly. Special coatings reduced internal friction. Software systems monitored operating conditions in real time, and perhaps most importantly, artificial intelligence began helping manage the entire process. Individually, none of these ideas were shocking. Together, they created something much harder to dismiss. System. 1, where every component was optimized to reduce waste. Every fraction of a percentage mattered. Every improvement built upon the last. And the result was a number that suddenly had competitors paying attention. This only matters once you see what happened. Next, because the engine itself wasn't the real story, the real story was what it revealed about China. For years, much of the world viewed Chinese automakers through a predictable lens. Fast followers, aggressive manufacturers, companies that excelled at scaling production and reducing costs. Innovation leadership was usually associated with places like Japan, Germany, or the United States. China built things, others invented them at least. That was the perception. But perceptions can change quickly, and nowhere was that becoming more obvious than in the automotive industry. While much of the world was focused on electric vehicles, Chinese companies were quietly investing enormous sums into research, software development, artificial intelligence, batteries, and advanced manufacturing. The results were beginning to appear everywhere: battery technology, electric vehicles, autonomous driving systems, and now, potentially, hybrid engines. What made this shift particularly significant was that China wasn't competing in just one area anymore. It was competing in all of them simultaneously. And that creates a very different kind of challenge, because when a company develops a new technology, competitors can often respond. But when an entire ecosystem begins moving faster, the response becomes much harder. China had spent years building control over critical parts of the automotive supply chain: battery production, raw materials, electric motors, manufacturing, infrastructure, software, integration, semiconductor development. Each individual advantage might not seem overwhelming. They created speed. And speed changes everything. A company that can develop, test, manufacture, and deploy new technology faster gains opportunities that slower competitors simply don't have. This is where companies like Toyota and Honda find themselves facing a difficult reality. Neither company is in trouble. From it, both remain engineering powerhouses. With decades of expertise, Toyota, especially, helped define modern hybrid technology. The Prius became one of the most influential vehicles of the last quarter century. Entire industries followed the path Toyota pioneered. But leadership creates a unique challenge. Once you become the benchmark, everyone starts chasing you, and eventually someone catches up, or perhaps even passes you. Ultimately proves superior in real-world conditions remains a subject experts continue to evaluate. Claims are one thing, mass production is another. Long-term reliability is another challenge entirely, but that's not the point. The point is that people are now asking the question, and once the question exists, the landscape changes. Could China become the new center of automotive innovation? Could hybrid technology enjoy a second life just as the world prepares for an electric future? Could consumers decide that practicality matters more than ideology? Those questions are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, companies across the industry are being forced to reconsider assumptions that seemed settled only a few years ago. Tesla continues pursuing a fully electric future. BYD expands aggressively in both EVs and hybrids. Traditional manufacturers are balancing investments across multiple technologies simultaneously, and consumers are watching closely. Because most buyers don't care about industry narratives. They care about value, care about convenience, they care about cost. The winning technology may not be the one with the most headlines. It may simply be the one that solves the most problems. And that's what makes this moment so fascinating. A few years ago, the future seemed obvious. Electric vehicles would replace gasoline cars. The transition would accelerate. The old technologies would slowly fade away. Simple, predictable, almost inevitable. But history rarely moves in straight lines. Sometimes an unexpected breakthrough appears, sometimes a forgotten technology evolves. Sometimes the future arrives from a direction nobody was watching. And maybe that's what makes this story bigger than one company, one engine, or one efficiency record. Because the most important question isn't whether 48.41% changes the industry. It's whether that number exposed something much larger. What if the future of transportation was never a choice between electric and gasoline? What if the real winner ends up being whatever technology gives people the fewest compromises? And if that's true, then the biggest automotive revolution of the next decade may look completely different from the one everyone predicted. The companies that understand this possibility are already making moves. Not always publicly, not always through flashy announcements, but behind the scenes. Strategies are shifting, because automotive history has shown something again and again. The companies that survive aren't necessarily the ones with the best technology. They're the ones that correctly predict what customers will actually want. And right now, that's becoming surprisingly difficult. For a long time, the conversation seemed straightforward. Electric vehicles offered lower running costs. Gasoline cars offered convenience. One technology would eventually replace the other, but hybrid systems have started, occupying an uncomfortable space in the middle, space that many experts once believed would disappear. Instead, it seems to be growing stronger.